Good day, I'm Chris Cordani, Dr. Jerome Corsi's producer. I'm here once again. Welcome to the Truth Central. Dr. Corsi continues to move forward with his research into suspicious voter roll algorithms with election interference potential in several U.S. states. On this edition of the program, we're going to be playing a recent conversation he had with Peter Moray to discuss how to beat the left's attempt at fortifying the election and what it would take for Trump's voters to overcome it as part of the Real Steel series here on the Truth Central. You can find out more about this effort and how to donate to help Dr. Corsi, Andrew Paquette, Dr. Graves, and the team expose the threat and stop this Real Steel through the website gods5stones.com. That's gods5stones.com, gods5stones.com. Here's Dr. Corsi's discussion now with Peter Moray.
So hi, everybody. This is Hatech Word. I'm Peter Moray, and today we have a special guest here on our studio via Zoom link. This is Dr. Corsi from the United States. Good morning, Dr. Corsi.
Good morning, Peter. It's great to be with you. Thank you.
Dr. Corsi is a journalist, veteran journalist, author of a number of best-selling New York Times best-selling list books, and also an expert on presidential politics, also advisor to politicians. So we are very happy to have you here on our program. We are exactly 2 weeks before the November elections. And the last time we spoke, it was, I guess, in February. And you predicted that this presidential campaign season will be nothing similar to ever before. There will be a number of surprises. And since then, we are living in a prolonged, repeated time of surprises. And this is October, of course, the period of the so-called October surprises. But every month this year was a kind of an October surprises. How do you see the situation now?
Well, I think we had any number of surprises. Joe Biden dropping out of the race was unprecedented. And it was unprecedented because it was actually like a coup d'etat. I mean, Barack Obama and Nancy Pelosi essentially told Joe Biden that he was not going to run for president this year. And they promoted Kamala Harris to be the candidate, even though she remains vice president. And Biden remains president, although for all intents and purposes, he's essentially a lame duck. He's hardly has any authority or power. And Kamala also is not president, so she doesn't have the authority of the office. So it's a very unusual situation. And Kamala has not surged. Right now we have an unusual situation in the United States where I think the Democrats understand that they are having a very much of a losing cause. I think their only chance is to steal the election, which they were planning to do. Clearly, we've found, and I've been one of my major projects since about June of this year, we've discovered that in the databases, the voter registration databases in the state boards of election, they have these algorithms written into it, which are a code, secret code, and it's intelligence agency capability, that it's that level of sophistication. And what these codes permit the criminals to do, and I don't think it's necessarily the boards of election themselves. I think it's possibly even the intelligence agencies, the CIA or the NSA, National Security Agency, who have decided to intervene in our elections, not just overseas. They've created a code that allows you to fabricate non-existent voters that can get legitimate state IDs so they can vote. And then you can hide those voters like a card marking scheme back into the deck of voters. So these criminals can begin to pull out the non-existent voters when they want them and to get them mail-in ballots, which certify because that non-existent voter has a legitimate voter ID. that is requesting a ballot and then voting the ballot through the machine, all of which could be done internally within the computers. So I think we're at a new level of realizing that even in Europe, when you see the European Union election, the parliamentary election, the first ballot, the conservatives do very well. The second ballot, they say, well, the left is surging and the left wins. Well, I call them to Italy and France. They say, Dr. Corsi, there's no surging going on in the balloting. The surging's happening in the computers. So I think the same systems are being used by the intelligence agencies in Europe. And it's very frightening to think our intelligence agencies may be running our elections.
Do you think that if there is not a margin large enough for Donald Trump, then this system, this crooked system, can reverse the outcome?
I believe it was designed to do that, and I believe that was the intention of the Democratic Party, that they intended to. In fact, even the psychological operation, a psyop, you can see being run, because what they do is they say, well, Joe Biden, after the debate with Donald Trump, did so poorly, he clearly can't be the candidate, because you can't say his poll numbers are anywhere near close to Donald Trump's. But Kamala Harris, if they promote her, they tried a psychological operation saying that she suddenly is surging and her poll numbers are equal to Donald Trump's or even beating Donald Trump's. Well, that's all nonsense. So Kamala Harris can't get 25 people to attend a rally unless she pays them. And Donald Trump is filling stadiums with people. So the country is, I think, had it with this neo-Marxism, this woke culture. And I think they've gone too far in abandoning God and telling parents that their children going to school, need sex change operations in order to change their gender. I think parents raising children are not very enthusiastic to see their children mutilated sexually before they reach the age of puberty. And the left has almost gone demonic. And what they've done, opening borders, complete chaos. We have inflation, which is very, very severely restricted the middle class. So the economics here are, not particularly good. Certainly not what the Democrats would want running an election. So the major answers to these algorithms is, first of all, as you suggest, a huge vote for Donald Trump, just a surge that makes it impossible to use these algorithms without being obvious that they're trying to steal an election. And I think this year I've done enough writing and others have. We've created a website. You can go to gods5stones.com. It's G-O-D, no apostrophe S, spell out five, F-I-V-E, and stones plural, gods5stones.com. It's a reference to, of course, David and Goliath. David picking up 5 smooth stones from the brook, which were the ones God intended him to use to kill Goliath. So therefore, we've exposed all this and made a major awareness of just how bad our voting systems are. Our voting registration files are polluted with double vote registrations and people who have registered before they were born, all kinds of irregularities, which appear to be records created from within the database and maintained by the criminals, which are just thousands and thousands of records. Maybe in New York, as many as 300,000 records that could be voted in this mail-in ballot scheme at the choice of the criminals. And the criminals are intelligence agencies at the control of the CIA or the National Security Agency outside any normal regulations or rules. It's virtually an act of treason being committed by our government agencies. So we've really lost control of the governments, and it's happening also in Europe with the European Union and the European Council, which has no regard for what the people of Europe want. They're on a Agenda 30 agenda from the United Nations. They want to not use hydrocarbon fuels. All these things are going to make the cost of living in Europe extremely expensive. And for countries like Hungary, you're fortunate you've resisted some of the immigration, but the European Union, like the United States, have flooded the country with millions of unvetted immigrants, which fundamentally changed the culture. And again, this crisis is, I'm saying the intelligence agencies, you can't run a major drug cartel without a bank. TD Bank just got fined $3 billion for money laundering. I caught in 2011 HSBC money laundering. They were money laundering for the Mexican cartels. Well, the CIA is in on that, and so is the Department of Treasury. All those wire transfers are monitored. You can't run a international drug cartel or a pedophilia operation without a bank. And so therefore the intelligence agencies are involved worldwide in these heinous crimes. And again, creating a lying structure to America. I wrote a book earlier this year on the JF Kennedy assassination called The Final Analysis. And I worked with Dr. David Mantik, who for 30 years is a radiation oncologist, studying X-rays for cancer patients for 4 decades, and as a PhD in physics. The 3 JFK skull X-rays from the autopsy from 1963 are all forged to mask evidence of frontal shots, and there's clear evidence of 2 frontal shots, which means that the CIA has been lying to us for 61 years about the Kennedy assassination. Why are buildings that weren't hit by the airplanes in 9/11, why did building number 7 come down? We invaded Iraq in 1991 to get weapons of mass destruction. Colin Powell told the world that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. We didn't find any. We now have a pandemic that's a bad flu and a vaccine that doesn't stop you from getting the disease. In fact, the vaccine may kill you. So we've had so much lying. I think worldwide, people are tired of it. And now you're seeing a reaction to it. And I think the intelligence agencies have gone too far. They need to be shut down. And I'd like to see the federal government start firing people by closing agencies that we don't need.
As you mentioned, all these lies and all these excesses, what about the voters? What about especially the Christian voters? Do they realize how crucial this election is? Are they ready to stand up and speak their voice, hear their voice, and make their votes?
Well, I think many of the churches in the United States have gone woke, and even Pope Francis appears to have gone LGBTQ plus, wants to do this synod movement to hear marginalized minorities and give a seat at the table to homosexuals and lesbians. I've been working very strongly with Archbishop Vigano in Italy. In fact, we just received last week, we're going to publish. I'm now a acquiring editor at Post Hill Press, where I've been publishing for a number of years. And we have Archbishop Vigano's book going on sale before the election on his excommunication. The book will be titled J'accuse, which is I accuse. And in the book, it's Archbishop Vigano is accusing Pope Francis of the schism, not following Catholic theology. And I believe we were going to have a statement from Archbishop Vigano saying to Catholics in the United States not to vote for Kamala Harris on any number of reasons, including the fact that the Democratic Party is running on a woman's right to choose, which means open abortion. And that means killing babies in the womb. And of course, that's only God can bestow life. We don't have the right to destroy life. I think many Christians are becoming aware that this threat to our faith is international. Christians are being persecuted around the world. And this is frightening in terms of end-day predictions that we would see Christians being persecuted, and it's happening. I think countries like Hungary are resisting, and they are beginning to say, no, I foresee that with the election of Donald Trump, we might see the breakup of the European Union, which is something I've been pushing for since it was created. And this globalism, which ends up, the Klaus Schwab's at the World Economic Forum will use the woke in order to destroy traditional society, capitalism. But as soon as the transhumans take over, with their machines and their robots, they'll have no use for the woke. The woke will be the first to go. And we have a depopulationist agenda where they don't, if you read authors like Noah Harari, they see no use for human beings. So you cut open a human being, as a postmodern idea, you see the lungs and the heart and the blood, but you don't see human rights. Human rights is just a narrative. It's just a fiction. Well, when you go down that route, you become satanic, you become anti-human. And if you don't have value to human life, there's no point to this whole existence. And we're closer to nuclear war than we've ever been. We've got a massive war developing in the Middle East. I expect Israel to attack Iran, and a massive attack imminently before the election, possibly even this week. I can see Iran unleashing a massive, massive attack I think they will target to kill the Ayatollahs. I think they will destroy the nuclear sites, even though it may take massive munitions to do so, sub-nuclear, but massive. I think they will destroy much of of Iran's infrastructure. And I think it'll be a massive missile attack. I don't think Israel will have to send an air attack. The distances are still large, but with technology today and long-range missiles and with drones, I think Israel's done massive damage in the Gaza. Now they are attacking Hezbollah in Lebanon. Over the weekend, Israel attacked one of the major banking institutions in Hezbollah that has been supporting Hezbollah with Iranian money. And the Obama-Biden presidencies have funded Iran with billions of dollars and allowed Iran to go back into the oil business, which has, again, given Iran enormous amounts of money from which to fund terrorism. After the October 7th attack, I think Benjamin Netanyahu sees this as an existential moment for Israel. And he's going to take the opportunity to completely destroy, to the extent he can, Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. And, it will not solve the problem in the Middle East, but it will at least gain Israel time while these terrorist organizations are, incapacitated. And if President Trump comes back into office, we may see a resumption of the Abraham Accords, which would try to convince various nations in the Middle East to work with Israel. The Middle East could thrive if these nations just accepted Israel's survival. And so the laying down of hatred against Jews is, I think, one of the fundamental mental diseases of the human race that needs to be put to bed. We need to be done with it. It's only destructive. But we're going to go through a very destructive period of time, which I think is a spiritual warfare. And I've been working very, very closely with Archbishop Vigano and plan to do so right up until the election. I think we'll be making some major statements in the next few days.
It will be very exciting to read and hear this statement. How do you see the events in the Middle East? How does it affect the presidential elections? Does it tip the scale towards Donald Trump, or we can see the outbreak of anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism all over the campuses and in the major cities, so it can be supporting the other camp as well?
Well, the Democratic Party is clearly aligned with radical Islam. And you see this on the campuses from the indoctrination being given to our students, is that they are now supporting Hamas. Well, Hamas was did this vicious attack on Israel, and it was an existential attack. I mean, the way the Hamas on October 7th came into Israel and massacred people, made it clear that the Hamas has never given up its idea of killing Jews. And so therefore, if they're still in this idea of Jew hatred and killing Jews and eliminating Israel, well, they're forcing Israel to survive. And Israel is now at a point of fighting for survival again. I think Donald Trump, the war is happening on the Biden-Harris watch. And one of the major problems Kamala Harris has in running for presidency is she's promising to do things different, turn the page and, going to revive. Well, why didn't she do it for the last 3 years? Why have we had an expanding war in Ukraine, which looks like it'll continue as long as we pour billions of dollars into it? And we've got a treasury, the Department of Defense has $2 trillion it can't account for. We're sending, I think the corruption in the Democratic Party is massive. Working with the CIA, again, the Biden family has just taken millions of dollars out of Ukraine and out of China. I think largely the CIA wants the war to continue to keep the money laundering going in Ukraine. And Zelensky, his whole internal group, I'm told, are now high on cocaine half the time. We've got so much money, and money's flowing in there. I'm sure that money's going to arms dealers and it's disappearing. So this is a chance for, the radical anti-American left, funded in part by our government and our CIA in the middle of it, are funding terrorism worldwide and stimulating wars, which, Donald Trump rightly has said that Ukraine has started this war. Really, Hillary Clinton and the CIA started this war going back to 2013 when they began working with oligarchs like Pinochet in Ukraine. And then they began with the Maidan rebellion, which overthrew, Yanukovych, who was a rightly elected president. He fled to Russia, and then sending in, Zelensky and the other governments, Poroshenko and the others were sending in these Nazi brigades into the provinces in the eastern part of Ukraine that were Russian speaking to try to put down a independence movement. And finally, Putin just couldn't tolerate it anymore. Putin had tried to formulate agreements, and Boris Johnson came in and wrecked the agreements in Zurich. So, the NATO wants war, and the Biden administration seemed to favor war. They were even very close. I believe we were at the brink of nuclear war during Biden's last year, and for some reason they pulled back. But when they started discussing sending long-range missiles from Ukraine into Russia, Putin was clearly telegraphing that nuclear war was possible. Russia changed its nuclear policy in order to authorize the use of nuclear weapons. And I think, this again, these are the American people, I think, are tired of this. There's no purpose to the war in Ukraine. The two provinces that we're fighting over, or what Ukraine wants to win back, Putin in his interview with Tucker Carlson made clear, have been aligned with Russia for 1,000 years and are predominantly Russian speaking, as is Crimea, much of the Crimea and Sevastopol. Well, Russia's not going to give up its position on the Black Sea. And to think that Russia's going to let the CIA put CIA missions on Russia's border and then have a Wuhan-like lab, which we've also positioned in Ukraine. The American people haven't been told the truth about much of this. But I think the American people are tired of war. They're tired of seeing how do we feed the children and pay the mortgage when we've got 12 or 13% or 15% inflation and the government lying about it. So, again, I think in my lifetime, I've never seen so much government lying out in the open. Governments taking actions which foster war and encourage war. If we hadn't funded Obama and Biden hadn't funded Iran, we wouldn't have empowered Hamas to do the October 7th attack. In part, they did that attack because they thought they had a green light from the White House. And they did. But Biden, every time Israel goes into Lebanon, our Secretary of State Blinken flies over there and tells them to have a ceasefire. We threaten to stop providing munitions. I mean, this has been historically, the American people have supported Israel since 1948, since the Holocaust. And again, this reversal of policy is in a world where we're losing our economic edge. Our dollar is under great strain. The BRICS nations may, this next couple of weeks, announce the formation of a gold-backed currency. International trade, which used to be 80% done in the dollar, is now about 50% done in the dollar, rapidly to diminish. We're going through a transitional period of time in the world, coming into a new configuration. And that new configuration can either be nuclear war, and which billions of people die, which is today a conceivable scenario, or it could be a new era of peace in which the nations learn to work together. But again, you can't have these bureaucracies unelected with their agendas, secret agendas, which are anti-democratic and totalitarian, trying to architect diseases that kill people and lie about that too.
So besides exposing these lies and cover-up scenarios, what can you suggest for Europeans, for Hungarians, Central Europeans, to withstand these trends? How can we?
I've just written a new book, which is here, The
Yes.
Anti-Globalist Manifesto, and Ending the War on Humanity. And in this book, I formed the Anti-Globalist Alliance as a formal organization here, and forming it also in Italy. And I hope to be able to make it viable in 2025. But what this book is saying is that, we have to stop these evil agendas of war, disease, constant economic upheaval, thinking it's desirable to kill billions of people, thinking we can transform a small number of us into transhumans. I think Bill Gates wants to become a computer program, to live forever as a computer program. These ideas are fundamentally insane. We have to accept the reality of human existence is that we're all going to die. This is not a permanent place, and you can't create utopia here. It's never worked in the history of human beings. We can make this place tolerable. We can make it thrive. We can have peace, but it takes communities. We've got to go back to making families again. We have to be resolved to keep our marriages together. We have to be resolved to raise our children with a moral education. We have to have not transnational companies come in with poisoned food. We need to have community markets and community farmers. We need to let people flourish in activities that are self-motivated. Rather than seeing people as useless, we need to see that the only true scarce resource on Earth is human intelligence. And human beings are, in fact, the resource that can turn the world into a garden, or we can turn it into a wasteland. And right now we're at the brink of that choice. And so this anti-globalism, I think globalism is I've written many books on this. I wrote a book called The Truth About Neo-Marxism, Cultural Maoism, and Anarchy, which I argue that this postmodernism, which is, that there are no permanent values, there's no standard, everything is subjective. Read authors like Baudrillard and Simulacra and Simulation, and it says everything is just a word game, everything is just a narrative. So your narrative is as good as my narrative, and someone who thinks that their sex is different than their gender, and their gender belongs to an animal who lived 3,000 years ago, it is insane, needs mental help. We don't need to celebrate that. We don't need to celebrate every sexual perversion human beings are capable of. We don't need to have a place at the table in the Vatican for Satan because Satan's a religion. We need to come to terms with our good ideas and bad ideas. There's right and there's wrong. There's things that work and things that don't work. And traditional morals, traditional values, going back to the ancient Greeks, have always been founded on a series of ideas of natural law and natural right. These subjectivities that we're going into, these, become schizophrenic. Really, schizophrenics run the government. Schizophrenics run the churches. Well, when churches go woke, the attendance drops. When churches stay traditional, the attendance increases. And so therefore we need to start with education, start with children, start with ourselves, and not have all these divorces of convenience of people who've been married for decades. It's just insanity. And so we need to get a concept again, which is fundamental Judeo-Christian, that this life is temporary and there are consequences to our behavior here. And so therefore, moral behavior is not only right, rewarded by God, but it also is the principles by which you can live a productive life. And if you don't follow these ideas, you're going to live a chaotic and disastrous life. And we're at the brink of a lot of these decisions. And this election in the United States in the next few days, I think, is going to show where the American people are. And I expect the American people are going to come out overwhelmingly for Donald Trump in massive numbers, because, what are the Democrats running on? More war, more abortion, killing babies, more broken marriages, broken homes. It's not what people want. It's not what any sane person wants. We have Venezuela gangs taking over apartment buildings in our major cities. Our cities aren't safe. And we've got millions of immigrants being dumped all over the place where they don't belong, with customs and habits that are completely foreign to the people living there, such that it's an intrusion into their lifestyles. But the government doesn't care. The government intentionally wants to disrupt. And a government which wants to cause disorder, unemployment, disease, and ultimately destruction is not a government anybody's going to vote for unless you're insane yourself.
What do you think about those ideas? I can hear from even from Christians saying that, okay, Donald Trump is saying that he is fighting against the deep state, but actually he is just another side of the same coin. He's a puppet of the banking oligarchy, and he will eventually lead us into another deception. Even some say that if he is not the Messiah, of course, but he can be an antichrist. So how would you react to those theories?
Well, it's disinformation, first of all. It's an attempt by the left to accuse Donald Trump of what the left is doing itself. It's like when the left says that Donald Trump is anti-democratic. Well, what Obama and Nancy Pelosi did to remove Joe Biden from the presidency effectively was completely anti-democratic. There's nothing in our Constitution which would enable them to go in and tell him he couldn't run for president again. Kamala Harris has not gone through any normal process of nomination. She's never really, as a candidate for presidency, won anything. Yet she's self-appointed by these people to be their candidate. I think that Donald Trump is not perfect, but among the choices we have, he's the best available right now. And certainly what we had under Donald Trump's presidency, we had no wars starting. We had an economy that was on the uptick, was rebuilding. We'd stopped this massive immigration into the country, and we were working around the world to foster a freedom. And again, we can have immigration, but it's got to be controlled. You can't just have open borders and the country flooded with whomever, and terrorists, this intelligence agencies out of control. I think Donald Trump is much better prepared for a second term. I think in the first term he was naive about how Washington operates. And I've always said about Washington, your first assumption has to be that if anybody's talking to you, they're lying. You just got to find out what they want. Why are they lying? And if you don't start that way, you don't have a chance. So when they come in and say, we're going to have a pandemic, millions of people are going to die if you don't shut down the economy, I'd say to them, show me your statistics and your numbers, and I'm going to get 10 other experts in here because I think you people are crazy. I wouldn't go along with them. They say, we're the health authorities. And say, yeah, well, I'm the president, so get out of my office. I've heard what you had to say, and let me think about it. But we're not doing what you're telling me to do. Okay, then get some serious advice and some serious thinking. And it was obvious those statistics had been cooked from the beginning. And they were trying to scare him into this, and they did. Well, again, I think that was an important lesson. And I think Donald Trump certainly has the ability the second time to make even more progress, but it's going to take getting control of the Department of Justice, which is no longer, it's a Department of Political Education. It's like the KGB of the Stasi. It does nothing to stop election fraud. It does nothing to investigate the CIA's activities. We've got a wide open border. We've got fentanyl pouring into the country. We've got pedophilia. Hundreds of thousands of children disappear. Some of which are being, mined for their body parts, not just put into pedophilia. Horrible crimes are being committed. Our Department of Justice does nothing. In fact, it's probably complicit. I said they go after Donald Trump for Russian collusion, and they went after me. They thought I had a tie to Julian Assange. And I spent 40 hours with the FBI and the special prosecutor. They said I was lying. I wouldn't give them over my tie to Julian Assange. I didn't have one. Never did talk to Julian Assange about anything or his organization. So they said they were going to put me in front of a jury and they were going to put me in prison the rest of my life. Or I could take a plea deal and admit I had a tie to Julian Assange. And they would then utilize that to go get Donald Trump on Russian collusion. Well, I told them that they could take a hike. They could put me in prison the rest of my life, but I wasn't going to go before a judge and God and swear to a lie. I didn't have a tie to Julian Assange, and I wouldn't say I did to stay out of jail. They didn't indict me. These are when the government's the criminals, when the government is in fact the enemy, it's time to get rid of the government. Now, I don't mean an insurrection, but what I do mean is Donald Trump has got to come in and say massively, we're going to start reducing the federal bureaucracy by department, or close the Department of Education. We don't need the Department of Transportation. We don't need this department. We don't need that department. We don't need to build a new building for the Department of Justice. We need to reduce it by half and put it back to its job. Why do we need a CIA? We don't need a CIA doing black ops all over the world, killing people and rigging elections, and running the drug trade. Maybe it could be an intelligence operation gathering intelligence information. You don't need the National Security Agency recording every conversation that goes on in the country. These things have got to stop, or we will quickly be enslaved.
Dr. Corsi, thank you very much for your insights. It's been very exciting, and we are following and, of course, praying for the United States, the American people, and for Europe, and for the world as well. And for our viewers, I just want to recommend that all these things could be read in more detail in Dr. Corsi's book that is readable in Hungarian, Killing the Deep State, Deep State Legyőzése. This is the Hungarian version of the book. I recommend it to everyone, and we look forward to your new book, The Anti-Globalist Alliance. We look forward to have that and read that in Hungarian as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. God bless.
God bless.